This is audio 4. We're on slide 20. I've really talked about this quite a bit already, so I'm just going to zoom through it. This whole problem with land seizures has become rather difficult because, again, it is a way that local party leaders can make an awful lot of money for themselves. Sad but true. And again, Beijing tolerates this at the local level as long as people are not overdoing it and making trouble for the central government by necessitating them having to send troops in to clean things up. And that's what happened in this town of Wukan in Guangdong province. And one of the reasons why this became such a big problem for Beijing was, A, the local party secretary was an idiot and decided to be violent and seize a lot of land. He was greedy. He overdid it. But that wasn't the only reason. The other catalyst in the situation is that Wukan is only about an hour and a half by taxi from the border with Hong Kong. That meant that there were plenty of foreign journalists who could come in and figure out what was going on. So that meant that there was immediate world coverage of the problem that was going on there. The party initially decided at the provincial level to call for People's Armed Police to be sent in to put down this action, because what actually happened at Wukan, at this small town in the middle of a county about 100 miles to the east-northeast of Hong Kong, what happened was that the local people became so incensed about what was going on, which included violent suppression by the local party committee, that they rounded up all the local communists and drove them out of town. Now that is a big deal in China. That's the sort of thing that the party would ordinarily label a counter-revolutionary rebellion and come in and start killing people over. And indeed, if there were no foreign correspondents in the area to take all the pictures and report on the details, that might have happened. But the Guangdong party secretary managed to get a hold of the situation and go in and negotiate with the people in the town and diffuse the situation, which got him promoted. So, what's there not to like? I urge you to take a look at this Power and the People video that I've put into course content this week. It includes another set of real examples about this sort of problem. Going on to slide 21. So this sort of incident is referred to as a mass incident. These figures you see here are a little bit troublesome because a mass incident can include just 5 or 10 people. But mass incidents also include disturbances of dozens or hundreds of people. And the fact that they've grown over the past 20 years is rather disquieting to party decision makers in Beijing. And indeed, since 2008, no statistics have been publicized, except that I think in 2011, somebody from the Public Security Ministry leaked to the press that 128,000 of these incidents had occurred in 2011. But I don't think there have been any official releases since 2008, for the obvious reason that the authorities would rather keep people guessing about this sort of problem. Going on to slide 22, another aspect of control that, with a lot of these things, it's sort of it's a fuzzy line between this being about the way the party controls China and the problems that exist in China that I'll discuss more next week. There's a little bit of a fudge factor here between the two subjects because so many of the party's policies lead to so many problems. But this one is a area of policy that's usually considered to be a problem area, the whole one-child policy thing. This is interesting, and I have included it in this week's lecture because it is a bit of an outlier in amongst the rest of policy. It is sort of a holdover in a sense from the Mao era, because even though Deng Xiaoping is the one who started it, Mao preferred to have more people rather than fewer people. You may remember that he once said that if there's a nuclear war, don't worry, the socialist world will prevail because we have more people. And therefore, there must have been a connection there. But Deng Xiaoping decided that population was becoming a problem, and he implemented the one-child policy, which was a very severe social control, and indeed it seems to be the last of the universally applied social controls that existed in the post-Mao era. But it's being cut back at this point. It's not gone. There are still some controls in the cities against having more than one child, but there have always been exceptions. And indeed, you can see in this projection that there's the idea that the population of China will eventually reverse and start to drop. But we're not there yet. It hasn't happened yet. There is the possibility that these forecasts, the one that's in the light blue line there, of if there were strict enforcement of the one-child policy, that's just theory. You can forget about that. That's not happening. It's this other darker line that is going higher and higher that is the reality. You can see where it was implemented and where we are now. And the population of China is not yet dropping. So we're not there yet, and it remains to be seen whether this UN forecast about the population of China will actually end up coming true. But one of the main social consequences of this policy has been that there are 103 or 104 women to 100 men born into the population in any particular year. That leads to social problems of an obvious type. Going on to slide 23. Again, this could be termed a problem, but it's also a indication of how things work in the party and the government. Journalists are very closely controlled because, as we've said in past lectures, the party has core businesses. Those are organization, the military, propaganda, and intelligence. And propaganda or information, party-sponsored journalism is a core business of the party. And indeed, why is that? Because you have this enormous body of people whose actions you want to influence and at some points control, and the way you do that is through the media. This is more and more of a problem as time goes on because the media is more and more atomized into web pages compared to past decades, just like in this country. But an interesting example of how this worked was when this company, Sunlu, which had recently, at the time, partnered in 2007 with a New Zealand company called Fontana to market its milk products in China with technology from Fontana to process milk. They ended up buying up this so-called protein powder that really contained a toxic poison called melamine that's usually used to make plastic dishes and plates, plastic cups, and so forth. It's the sort of thing that gives you kidney stones and leads to a toxic reaction in a large number of people. Fonterra, I'm sorry, is the name of that company in New Zealand. So when this started happening, at first this company, Sanlu, is based in Shijiazhuang, which is near Beijing. It's the capital of Hebei province that surrounds Beijing. The Shijiazhuang CCP covered everything up, and indeed the propaganda department of the party for a while tried to cover everything up until Fonterra went to the New Zealand government and said, we've got this problem, the Chinese aren't doing anything about it, and we don't want to cause more deaths of more babies. So the New Zealand government made an immediate démarche to the Chinese government and said, you've got to do something about this because it's going to be in the press really fast. And besides that, it's wrong to poison babies. Don't you agree? So the Chinese government immediately made a 180-degree turn along with the party and had this a number of people arrested over this problem and immediately solved it. It is an unfortunate example, one of many, that when there is a problem like this, as long as local authorities are keeping it under control, Beijing doesn't care. But if they embarrass Beijing, then Beijing weighs in. They'll fire people, put people in jail as necessary, and call it a victory for the correct policies of the center, when in reality, the center, the policies promoted by the center are the cause of the problem to begin with. Going on to slide 24, just really quick, you can see how the internet responds to this. Top left corner there, some people put a bag of Sanlu milk on the table there beside them, and they're pretending like they're snorting cocaine. It's really milk powder. The big bad wolf giving milk to a baby, so on and so forth. The usual grieving relative with a picture of the dead loved one. Yes, this is the way things are, until it becomes too embarrassing for the central government, and then we have a heroic crackdown. Slide 25, why did this happen? I don't want to go through and read it all to you. You can stop the audio and just take a close look at it. But the real bottom line here, in my opinion, as someone who has lived in China for long periods of time and who has visited China 100 times when I wasn't living there, I have to say is that in China, unfortunately, there is a very low level of civic responsibility. If something goes wrong in public, in many countries, especially in the West, you will see people on the street intervening to try to stop a bad situation from happening. We're not perfect at this. There's no doubt about that. We have our bumbles and our stumbles and our horrific incidents in the West. But for the most part, there's some sense of public responsibility for the common good. In China, there is very, very little in comparison. Again, these are not absolutes. They are very strong tendencies, however. Going on to slide 26. Let's shift focus a bit and talk about foreign policy. The PRC's new foreign policy now, which is only now developing, is to put a greater focus on asserting China's proper place in the world, as opposed to just getting along with the U.S. and trying to keep everything stable to give China time to develop. The PRC and indeed the Communist Party, I have to say, are not a monolith. It is not one big brother. The PRC government and its ruling party is made up of factions that I alluded to earlier. People from who are affiliated with a faction that came from the party school, the Communist Youth League, a faction that is oriented toward the military, a faction that's oriented toward the princelings, as they're sometimes called, the sons and daughters of high officials from PRC history. It's because the party is the one powerful institution in society that rules over everything, and there's no competition, that you have these factions. But one of the common goals of all of the factions is to increase China's power in the international arena. Its continued stable development of economy and society, its borders, its national security, territorial integrity, all these things are extremely important to all of the factions. So it is because of this, in order to promote unity, partly, and partly also to make clear to foreign powers what's important to China, this idea of China's core interests, or 核心利益, has become more prominent in public pronouncements in the PRC in the last decade. On Tibet, which we've discussed previously, why it's very important for China to maintain control of Tibet in order to protect its core area. This is very clear. On Taiwan, the interest is also very clear. China does not want Taiwan becoming all of a sudden its own country, separate from China, because that would encourage other areas like people in Tibet, people in Xinjiang, even Inner Mongolia, to start talking about their own autonomous or independent areas. So that's a core interest. Going on to the next slide, slide 27. An aspect of this core interest is to protect China's rear area, that is the area to the west and north. And for that reason, China has initiated this Shanghai Cooperation Organization, or the Shanghai 合作组织, which you'll notice on this map does not include Mongolia. It does not include North Korea. It does include all of the former Soviet Union. All of it. Every bit of it. And that's interesting, because it means that Chinese policymakers have decided, I think correctly, that they have a number of common interests with these other members that are on this map illustration that you see here. They include resisting U.S. global domination. They include combating terrorism or separatism of the ethnic minorities that populate these border areas, maintaining the present borders, so that China can concentrate on the real threat to its territorial integrity as well as its societal stability, and that is, as they see it anyway, that is the pernicious influence of the West with its non-socialist ideology, with its ideas of freedom, elections, and so forth, that they do not want to allow to penetrate Chinese society too deeply. Going on to slide 28, this is a very self-explanatory chart. You can see that references to core interests in the People's Daily, which is the flagship newspaper in China, have gone up and up and up in the past 10 years. Continuing, we'll talk now, see if we can wind this up quickly, about the alternative that lies in Taiwan. Going on to slide 30. When Chiang Kai-shek died in 1975, his son Jiang Jingguo took over. He was in power for 14 years, and he is the one who was responsible for ending martial law in 1986 and moving toward political pluralism. He appointed as his vice president Lee Dong-hui, who was in office after him from 1988 to 2000. Lee Dong-hui was a native Taiwan person, a native Taiwanese. He was Chinese by, he's still alive, Chinese by ancestry, but his ancestors had lived in Taiwan for 3 or 4 generations. Chen Shui-bian, who was from a different political party, the Democratic Progressive Party, was also a Taiwanese of Chinese ancestry, whose ancestors came to Taiwan probably 100 years before. But his different party, which took over the executive part of government anyway in 2000, was not the KMT. It was this Democratic Progressive Party, and for the first time since 1947, Taiwan was not ruled by the KMT, the Kuomintang, the Chinese Nationalist Party. However, the Chinese Nationalist Party retained great influence, going on to slide 31. And that influence was that they had split it into two, and that's why they lost that election in 2000, but they had the majority between those two factions, one of which became a separate party briefly. They had the majority in parliament. They retained that majority. The DPP never had a majority in parliament all the time that Chen Shui-bian was president. And so that meant that Chen Shui-bian's legislative program never went anywhere. He very overtly wanted to move Taiwan toward independence. He changed the passports, for example, to say Taiwan instead of Republic of China. All the forms in government were changed to read Taiwan instead of Republic of China. The pictures of Jiang Jieshi, Chiang Kai-shek, and Jiang Jingguo that were in all the government buildings were taken down. And the Chinese communists were getting nervous because, as I mentioned a little while ago, the last thing they ever wanted was for Taiwan to become a de facto independent country, even though, or rather a de jure, an independent country in name. They were already a de facto independent country, but the thing that had changed in Lee Dong-hui's time was that instead of formally calling for eventual liberation of the mainland, Lee Dong-hui's government called for eventual peaceful reunification. And that's something that Chen Shui-bian's government under the Democratic Progressive Party ignored. And they wanted to move toward a formal declaration of independence, and they tried to get a referendum on the ballot to pursue that. This file is getting a little bit too big. I'm going to stop here, and we'll finish up, continuing on slide 31.